I'm frequently asked, how come, Albie, you introduced culture into the political movement? Well, let me tell you a story that goes back to when I was 17, but a little before, sitting on the bench marked non-whites only. And I'd been born into a very activist family. My dad was a trade union organizer, Garment Workers Union. My mom worked for Moses Kotane as his typist. And she'd say, tidy up, Uncle Moses is coming. But it wasn't Moses Cohen, it was Moses Kotane. And so I grew up in that anti-racist environment, an environment where birthdays didn't matter, but liberation was important. And you would have seen in my biography, at the age of 6, my dad sent me a birthday greeting. My parents were separated. It was during World War II. Albert, may you grow up to be a soldier in the fight for liberation. I think that's a bit heavy for a 6-year-old, but it gives you some idea. But I hated my parents assuming that I would automatically follow their position, so I wasn't engaged at all. My mom said to me one day, I'm in my 2nd year university, I didn't even know who to vote for in the student elections. I was climbing mountains, I was playing cricket, I was reading poetry. She said, you must go and listen to Ace Krige, the poet. And I went. She knew I was interested in poetry. And he was going to give a presentation on a Spanish poet called Lorca. I didn't even know they had poets in Spain. You know, they had bullfights, and in any event, Ace, who was a very liberated Afrikaner who'd gone to Europe in the 30s, been in Spain at the end of the Civil War, been captured, in fact fought against the Nazis, been a prisoner of war in Italy, written beautiful poetry about his experiences there and so on. He just walked up and down speaking about Lorca in English, in Afrikaans, in Spanish, a bit of French. And I remember him quoting the Neruda poem at 5 in the afternoon, a las 5 de la tarde, when Lorca was assassinated, was murdered by the firing squad, a las 5 de la tarde. And the impact on me was enormous, because what this did was it linked up the intimacy of poetry, the soulfulness, the longings, the dreaming of a meaningful existence in a meaningful world that had been very subjective, with the grand public events. And a week later, the lecture was on Pablo Neruda. Now imagine if I didn't know they had poets in Spain. In Latin America, they had alligators, we had crocodiles. We had Mount Kilimanjaro, they had the Andes. We had the Nile, and they had the Amazon. That was kind of the limit of it. And of course, Neruda wrote about volcanoes and love and revolution, and whew, it just swept me away completely. So a week later, I was in the Modern Youth Society, and a few months later, I was sitting on a bench as part of the Defiance of Industrials campaign. The fact is, it was culture that got me into politics. I didn't bring politics into culture. So for me, that connection between the two was organic. It wasn't how can we advance the struggle by means of enlisting culture. It was all part of that same world. And lo and behold, sure enough, not long afterwards, we were introduced to the Mexican muralists. And this was now in the mid-1950s. And we had an older person, a friend. She was a painter, and she introduced us to Diego Rivera, Sequeiros, Orozco. And here was art being taken out of the art books, and taken out of the cathedrals, and taken out of the private holdings, out in the public square. And it wasn't just in the public square, but it was about the Aztecs, the ancient people, the themes, the modalities, the forms of expression were revolutionary. And we actually painted a picture of People's Cape Town, Not the fairest Cape for tourists to come to the wonderful beaches and drink sundowners, but Cape Town of the dock workers and the railway workers and the flower sellers and the newspaper sellers. And we all got a big kick out of filling in the blocks in the little warehouse where we used to meet, and the police came in, we were chucked out of there, the whole thing was painted over. But that idea of art somehow being part and parcel of public life, but also public life expressing itself in a form that wasn't just about things and about power, but was about imagination and dreams and emotion and dignity. That idea was firmly implanted. And the impulse to paint murals was suppressed. It isn't great when I went into exile in England. There aren't all that number of public walls waiting for daubing. But Mozambique becomes independent. I go to Mozambique, I'm back in Africa. And as the film says, in England I met fantastic people. I did things that were very remarkable in my life. But even when I was happy in England, I was unhappy. In Mozambique, even when I was unhappy, I was happy. I just had a different connection. And partly it was because of the artistic upsurge at that stage that came with independence, with the revolution. People going out into the streets and just painting the slogans and images on the walls all over the place. And by the time I arrived, there were now exiles from Chile, in particular, from Unidad Popular, who'd been doing art in support of the Allende government. They're now in exile. They're meeting up with Mozambican artists like Malangatana, and they're doing fantastic murals. And I actually now was asked one morning to go and help dip the brush in a pot of paint. I was so nervous just copying a flower that Malangatana had traced, but feeling thrilled and excited. And for a year we were painting beautiful murals in different parts of Maputo, and then we ran out of paint. And that was the end of that. It wasn't counter-revolution, we just ran out of paint. Of course, Mozambique then, the civil war, a lot of terrible drama, negativity. I'm blown up, I come back to England, and I might say that my first contacts with Ford Foundation go back to Mozambique. And there was a chap, I think his name was Fry, based in Dar es Salaam, I think, who had contact, who assisted us in some of our projects in Mozambique at that stage. And then back to South Africa. I'm speaking about the ANC has a conference on culture. In 1989, we're still in exile. And I sent a paper called Preparing Ourselves for Freedom. Are we ready for freedom? And the paper was sparked by an experience I'd had after being blown up. I recovered. I came to, my first job was at the University of Columbia. And I'm writing The Soft Vengeance of a Freedom Fighter. It's the title of the film. I'm writing there. I'm not sure if I can write. Can I use a computer just with my left? Is my brain strong enough to write, to get words together? And that's where I really came together. I'd had the physiotherapy and the occupational therapy, but you need another kind of therapy, the soul therapy, if you like. The guts therapy, the confidence therapy, and that's what I got when I was at Columbia. And finished the manuscript, and I'm invited to speak at the Kulturhuset in Sweden. And Sweden devotes a lot of attention to public art, public libraries, the idea of culture being something accessible, not just for the people who can spend a lot of money going to the opera and to the ballet and so on, but to get it out there. And the Kulturhuset is one of the most prominent buildings in Stockholm with a multiple set of arenas for public participation, involvement in artistic activity. They asked me to speak for 45 minutes, then they said for 35 minutes. Then they said for 15 minutes. When I got there, they said for 5 minutes. So I said, okay, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to make 2 points. They had an exhibition there of artists, 4 artists from Angola, 4 from Mozambique, 4 from Zimbabwe, 4 from South Africa. It was a terrific tribute to Southern Africa's artistic capabilities. But the people went round and everybody smiled and smiled and smiled. And I said, okay, down to 5 minutes, I'm making 2 points. The first point is, we don't want your solidarity. Uh-oh, they're waiting for it now. Is this going to be a diatribe against northern domination and so on? I said, you've been looking at our art, you just smile, you don't engage with it. We don't want solidarity criticism. We want real criticism, real engagement. Your solidarity was to bring the work here. Now tell us how you respond. If you like it, say so. If you don't like it, say so. If you're not sure, ask. So they relax. Then I said, we must stop. That's my 2 minutes. 3 minutes. You must stop saying art is a weapon of struggle. Everybody said that. The reason I was reduced to 5 minutes from 45 is they had about 15 people who all said the same thing. Art is a weapon of struggle. Art is a weapon of struggle. Culture is a weapon of struggle. Culture is an instrument. There were slight variations in the vocabulary. And I thought, you're saying nothing. Now, I'd been saying that for years and years and years. And suddenly I realized we've reached the stage now, okay, we've got people supporting the anti-apartheid struggle, South African artists, international artists. We've achieved that sense of a common endeavor to overthrow apartheid. We're there. Now we must do something more exciting, more challenging, more daring, more interesting. We should have the courage, the conviction, and the confidence in our artists and in ourselves to invite, I said, a weapon fires in one direction. Art fires in many directions. It wouldn't work if you knew what the outcome would be. A weapon has a predicted and predictable outcome. Art goes all over the place. We simplify the world in which we're functioning into us, heroic, noble figures, and them, dull, even physically ugly enemy. And I said, but what about the tragedies inside our own ranks? What about our own failures? What about reclaiming some kind of humanity in the others, on the other side? Life is full of contradictions. What about mystery? What about tragedy? I said, when you join the ANC, do you give up making love? When you go to bed at night, you just discuss the role of the white working class, which was based on an actual story I'd heard from somebody married to one of our guys, and she said, I'm bored by their discussions. All they discuss is what's the future role of the white working class in South Africa. So it was an appeal for a more engaged, more daring, more challenging, and more confident art, and not the simplified, sloganistic art, which I myself had been supporting for a long time. And it was absolutely timely, because shortly afterwards Mandela was released, and this meant a willingness on the part of the ANC to explore a much more open kind of society than sometimes in the hard years of the international boycott, the cultural boycott, where things were done in a schematic way. We had a cultural desk in Johannesburg, and the person manning, it was a man, manning that desk could decide who could travel abroad, who could be received, and so on. And it became so imperious that we stopped even using the word desk, because the word desk now was associated with domination and authoritarianism. So that was another phase in the story I'm telling. Now we fast forward to Albie Sachs' justice, Albert Louis Sachs, on the Constitutional Court. And at our very, very first meeting, on borrowed chairs. We had nothing. We had to invent ourselves how to be addressed, how to dress. Our rules of court, tasks are being given out. The library to Judge Dori Ackerman, computers just coming in then, 94, to Kate O'Regan, the gown, Tolly Madala. Everybody has a task. Rules of court, Ismail Mohammed, and Albie Sachs and Yvonne Mokgoro have nothing. So Arthur says, Arthur Chaskelson, the Chief Justice, will you do decor? And here's $2,000. Now I'm going to ask you to pass around. We've got 2 copies of this book. Look what you can do with $2,000. You just have to be slightly mad, the right moment in history, support of the arts community, and that's what you can produce. We built our new constitutional court after an international competition right in the heart of the old Fort Prison in Johannesburg. So we're locating the theme of justice in a site of memory, in a site of intense pain, where both Gandhi and Mandela had been locked up. No one else can make that claim, that we, South Africans, locked up both Gandhi and Mandela in one prison, not at the same time. And that's where we built our court. And the theme is negativity into positivity. It's giving enormous weight to the importance of history, of memory, of emotion. And you don't suppress memory. You don't say it didn't happen. Many people were saying, knock down that horrible prison, that site of pain. We said, no, the prison must be there. It must be a reminder, but it mustn't be used to trap us in the past. We put up the new building alongside, right in the heart of that prison, so the negativity gets transformed into positivity. And I found myself often thinking of that phrase in Isaiah, transforming swords into plowshares. It's not throwing away the swords and creating plowshares. It's taking the swords and using that same metal to transform it into plowshares. And in a sense, that's what we've been trying to do in South Africa. It's us. There's no Marshall Plan. There's no aid from outside that's going to rescue us. There's no army of conquest that's going to impose a new constitution. We have to do it ourselves. So it's an enormous imaginative project, as well as a scientific one, as well as an emotional one. And we had the privilege and the joy of being able to construct that building right in the heart of the old prison. Another theme that I had picked up in my early days in Modern Youth Society was the Bauhaus movement in Austria and Germany. Not spoken about so much now, but certainly for my generation, it was the architects and the craftspeople and the artists and socially aware people coming together. How can we fuse these different elements to create a new kind of architecture that will provide dignified living and working spaces for ordinary people? And to my great delight, when this book was launched in Cape Town, a very distinguished architect, Joe Noero, said, the Constitutional Court of South Africa represents the greatest materialization of the Bauhaus dream that he knows of in the world. We weren't setting out to Bauhaus the Bauhaus, but that was the result of the moment, the energy, and the bringing of the artists, the architects, the judges, the achievement of justice, all into one kind of project. So it's been an enormous source of delight for me. Ford was there at very special moments, particularly supporting the art side of it, the art dimension. You don't get money from government, you get money for the library, for transport for the judges, for books, for the mortar of the building. But artwork, come on. You know, that's not part of the Justice Project. And some people, when I take them on tours around, they say, but is it right when there's so much hunger in South Africa? So many people are still living in shacks. Problems of education. Is it right to spend money on art and a beautiful building? And I say, it's not only right, but it's necessary. Are you saying the poor only want a full belly? That the poor don't dream? That the poor don't have longings for beauty? That the poor don't want a building where they can feel they are welcome and not go round to the back and feel terrified and somebody else is going to show you where to go in this particular building? In any event, for me, this was a materialization of the importance of the theme of what Ford is now developing into, I think, a very, very exciting project. And it's exciting because it's not an instrument of development where you have a predictable and measurable result. It's dealing with the intangibles. It's dealing with the imagination. It's dealing with themes of human solidarity and contact. And it's dealing with it in a way that is risky, that is daring, that is challenging, but animated by a profound moral conviction that at the core of everything we do is human dignity and advancing human dignity.
Maybe just to get us started, I actually have a dozen or more questions. Maybe, I mean, one is you were talking a little bit about memory and memory sites and sites of conscience and things like that, and I was reminded of a story, I don't know if it's true, and maybe you were there for this when this happened, that apparently the MK fighters wanted to blow up the Voortrekker Monument during the 1980s. They wanted to destroy. The Voortrekker Monument is this monument to the Battle of Blood River, I guess, and the founding moment in South Africa, and it represents kind of white privilege in South Africa, and wanted to blow it up. And my understanding is that the ANC had an internal discussion about this, and the result of that discussion was to say, no, when we have democracy, we're going to transform that into a site of dialogue and reconciliation. I'm wondering about sites like that, sites that are remind people of the apartheid years and how you engage with those and what you do with those and what kinds of new monuments can be built in the democratic South Africa.
The Voortrekker Monument is in Pretoria. It was the place that celebrated Afrikaner nationalism, the victory in the polls, the seizure of political power through the whites-only ballot. And they would have huge gatherings there every year. And it became the symbol of apartheid and racist domination. And it physically commemorated the defeat of Zulu people in the 19th century. It's still there. It's the same building. It's lost its power. It's the very same building physically. If it had been blown up, it would have retained the power. In fact, that power would have been exaggerated in the minds of people who supported it. And it's just like, you know, if one were thinking in sexual terms, it needs a lot of Viagra to have any potency in the world today. And yet, for some Afrikaners, it's still a place where they assemble. So it hasn't been destroyed, but it's kind of lonely. It's still there. And other monuments are going up which represent the transformation of the country and not glorifying a particular section of the community. Interestingly enough, the monument that's attracted the most wrath is the statue of Cecil John Rhodes at the University of Cape Town. Now, Rhodesia was named after him, Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia. Rhodes University is named after him. And he, now imagine this Oxford-educated gent comes from England, and he does battle with the biggest rogues and crooks from all over the world to get control of the diamond mines and the gold mines. And this wasn't fair fighting. And he emerged at the top. So you've got to be a real rascal, but at a level of grandeur to do that. He used machine guns against African people for the first time. The conquest of what became Rhodesia was done through massacres with machine guns. So for many people in Southern Africa, and he was proud of the term imperialism. He was a grand British imperialist. In any event, I used to hitchhike to the University of Cape Town up on the mountainside, and I'm always late, and I'm running, and I had to go past the statue of Rhodes. And in terms of my background, you know, trade union, dad, and so on, Rhodes was part of conquest and denial of African rights and seizure and plunder and so on. But I was irritated, but we were fighting other things, that we could have some black students at the University of Cape Town, but they couldn't play tennis and swim in the swimming pools. They could study black and white together, but not participate. So we were fighting. In fact, the very first public speech I made was about 1,000 students, and I went up and I gave what I thought was the most passionate denunciation of social segregation, pouring my heart out, and I came and sat down, and my friend said, "Albie, that's just what we needed, a nice quiet speech." But now we have a majority of black students on the campus, and they're raising the question not of the Voortrekker Monument, which has been disempowered, but of Rhodes, who's still proudly sitting there at the entrance to the University of Cape Town. And that statue is being removed. There was a tremendous rebellion. Exciting, because universities, to my mind, are not just places where you learn facts and theories and history and critical thinking, important though they are. You also learn how to take decisions, how to make a stand. A whole range of issues like that become part and parcel of university education. There were some ugly moments. The university, I think, has handled them pretty well by and large. But that's where the firepower now is, not the old obvious racist statutes and statutes, but the people who lorded it over the country and who were very involved with the financing of apartheid. And Rhodes provided the land on which the university was built. He was the great philanthropist. I don't want to say he was the Ford of his times, but you know, there's a lot of ambiguity involved in relation to issues like that. In any event, they're tremendous, I think, exciting debates. I hope that they can be managed well with productive outcomes.
I'm sure there are. Are there other comments or questions? I mean, while we're waiting, just to build on that. So, are there new sites that have been? So that's a question about old, you know, monuments, et cetera. You mentioned Constitution Hill, and obviously the architecture of the Constitutional Court. I mean, what are some new sites that have been developed?
Well, I gave a lecture recently to a program just being started at the University of the Free State on using art as a means of healing and dealing with past pain and memory. And Professor Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela, she's the one who came to prominence through a work for the Truth Commission and interviewing the head of the hit squads, Prime Evil, his name was, who's just been released on parole recently. She's heading that program. And my talk was on sites of memory. Some are purpose-built. The Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg, very, very skillfully done. It's very powerful. It was built as part of a program to get a license for gambling. So the casino is round the corner, hidden away, fortunately, and visitors go there and they get a good, slightly experiential history of what apartheid meant. And it's very well managed and mounted. Constitutional Court is a new building, but on an old site. Robben Island people go to, and there's been very little intervention, but it's very powerful. I think the most powerful sites are the sites of actual memory, more powerful than any museum that can be constructed, but we need all of them. The District 6 Museum in Cape Town is one of my favorites. Yeah. Very small, the people who were removed, they've just got little artifacts and memories and things that people wrote. Very community-driven little museum without spectacular experiential moments and great themes of design, but lots of heart and passion. So we have very good examples like that. Freedom Hill outside Pretoria.
Which is juxtaposed to the Voortrekker Monument,
it
right?
Is.
Yeah.
but it's not working.
Yeah.
It's got wonderful architecture. It's got a hillside. It lacks mystery. It lacks emotion. It's
maybe too planned, no? Or
well, it's become too planned, and it's too controlled. But its time will come. It needs people to go there and picnic and have fun, and to go to meet other people there and to mix, all the different life experiences rather than very solemn visits to a museum if you get a permit under a lot of control. The most exciting project is in a state of collapse right now. It's the Red Location in Port Elizabeth, built right in the heart of a very poor area, and it uses a lot of corrugated iron, but now as a material of dignity, not a material of poverty, material of dignity, with brilliant design and performing art studios and a whole range of things. And it's been closed down because the people are saying, we want houses, and you promised us houses. And it shouldn't be a choice between a museum and houses. If you don't provide a corresponding bunch of houses for the people in the community, they're going to say, nothing doing. So, that's ground to a halt.
Yeah. Oh, we actually need the microphone for recording.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. What do you think it's going to take to move the economy and the country forward so that people can have the houses and the jobs that they need?
We haven't stood still. There's been an enormous amount of reconstruction. The armies were united together, all the separate apartheid administrative structures brought together. 3.5 million homes have been given free to people to move from shacks. Maybe 12 million out of 50 million people have moved from shacks into homes with electricity and water. 90% of people now have access to electricity, to clean, drinkable water. So there is, in that sense, major progress, and we have quite extensive welfare programs. And that means instead of starvation, you have hunger. But hunger is not acceptable. But something like 30%, 35% of the people, children in particular, old age people and disabled people get social grants. So it's not as though nothing has changed. But what people can't stand is corruption. They can't stand abuse of power. They will be very patient because people know it took a long time to get our democracy. It's going to take a long time to get the economy really going. But they can't bear cheating along the way, particularly if it comes from people who've been active in the struggle or who are now joining simply for the sake of advantages. So I think what's terrific is it's a very open society. People speak their minds. They speak out. South Africans are not afraid to voice their opinions. We have a very lively press, a strong judiciary, powerful political campaigning. So in that sense, it's a very spirited country. And my thesis these days is really, we've got a great constitution, we've got a great country, but in many ways a lousy society. And we've got to use the great country to deal with the lousy society. We mustn't knock our country and beat ourselves down and diminish the huge achievements we've made simply because there are lots of things going wrong and problems with leadership and all sorts of issues that concern many people very, very much. We've got to use our strengths to combat, use the democracy we fought for to get the society that we really want.
Rakesh?
Can you say something about music?
The hills are alive. I often say that our jazz musicians wrote our constitution in music long before we lawyers wrote it in words. Music is very profound in South Africa. We have the greatest choral singers in the world because it's every family, community, workplace. I remember going to meetings You know, I used to learn, we had singing lessons at school, and none of us were really good. And I'd go to a public meeting, and somebody would stand up, and she'd be soprano, and completely new song, and people would join in 4-part harmony, 500, 1,000 people. They just, you know, music was part of life, part of sorrow, part of joy, funerals, weddings, and now we were introducing it into struggle. And the songs used to be so sad. My boye, my boye, my boye, Africa, come back Africa. Senzenina, Senzenina, what have we done to deserve this? And suddenly it's Dr. Morocco, Dr. Dadu, JB Marks, Katani Labour Party, volunteers, obey the orders, be ready for the action now. That's when I joined the Defiance campaign. And even today when people go on strike, they sing, they toy, they dance in the streets. We're producing wonderful opera singers is emerging from this. We have great choral music, we have great gospel singers. We have 3 symphony orchestras. When I came back from exile after 24 years, the first day I climbed Table Mountain. I wasn't sure if I could do it. It was an easy walk up. I walked right across the top, down. I felt triumphant. I dreamt of that every day of my exile. The first Thursday night, I went to the symphony concert. And it was the one place in the darkest days where I could go and drift off and feel just safe. Beethoven, you know, it would just be, it was kind of special for me. And during intervals, somebody came up to me and she said, welcome back, Albie Sachs. For 20 years, you never missed a concert except when you went to jail. And it was a marvelous, marvelous reconnection. And I mention that just to say, music is alive and well. It could be a lot better. Money is wasted on international concerts, Africa Days coming up, and they will pay a lot of money to get a few big star names. Much more needs to be spent on getting artists from Africa, and not necessarily from the United States or from Europe, and much more on developing venues for musical production. And we have terrific dance, by the way, in South Africa, contemporary dance. So it's a lively, spirited area, and one that fills me with a lot of pleasure.
Lourdes. Where's the...
Great, thank you for being back here. It was great hearing you in 2008, and it's wonderful hearing you now. I wonder if you can comment about the design of the court where the justices sit below as compared to here in the United States where the justices sit on top.
In our temporary accommodation, there was a very low ceiling, so there was no choice. We sat more or less here, and if you're standing up, your eye level would be roughly the same. If we went any higher, our heads would bang the roof. But we constructed this new building, and we wanted a high vault. It somehow went with the majesty, if you like, of the project of justice. But we didn't want us to be majestic. So we decided we would be on a platform, I think it's the bench, as we call it, is roughly the height we are. Would you mind standing up? Hi there. It was quite important, symbolically, for the dialogue to be between equals. We're all equal under the Constitution. You're not coming to plead for something to oracles sitting high up there. And the spectators sitting at the back, in fact, are even higher up than we would be seated. And I must say, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that sense of closeness, of intimacy with the spectators and with the council addressing us. It went with other things. We took bricks from the old awaiting trial block. We clad the wall behind us with those bricks. It's a kind of reminder. The very bricks that we used to lock people up are now used as part and parcel of the protection of fundamental rights. We have a ribbon of glass that runs all the way around. And we see, you heard me in 2008, and tell me if I deviate from my old stories. You can put up your hand and say, no, you told it differently last time. But we see the knees and the thighs of people walking by. And I'm amused because, you know, that's the non-racial, non-sexist world our Constitution speaks about. You can't tell from knees and thighs, often if it's a he or a she or black or white or brown. But there's a sense of humanity is outside there. It's a reminder. It's a reminder to the judges and everybody in the court that justice is about the rights of people. So a whole complex of matrix of details like this, together with the light that streams in and the sense of being connected with nature and the use of passive cooling, trapping the cold night air in rocks in the basement and pumping it into the building during the day so that we're not using non-renewable energy, but it's more than that. It means you can open windows. It means you can have balconies. It means the air is fresh. It's not that refrigerated, stale air produced by a machine. All of these things we feel humanize the building and make it appropriate to say this is what the Bauhaus people were dreaming of.
Could you talk a little bit about what we might call more popular culture, things like soap operas, television? I mean, is there an effort to use those kinds of media to talk about values? I mean, I've seen a lot of different languages being spoken in these soap operas and things.
Yes, there is. When I came back from 24 years of exile, the Film and Allied Workers Organization, you know, I'd written this thing about art not being reduced to a simple weapon of struggle. It was picked up as saying, Albie says you must keep politics out of art. I wasn't saying that at all. This was for the ANC. It was for political people. Art is so much part and parcel of life, of politics, of the drama of the nation. You can't separate it even if you want to. But in any event, so now the Film and Allied Workers Organization, who'd been smuggling out films of repression, of funerals, of interviews with Winnie Mandela and others, invite Comrade Albie Sachs to speak. And I made 2 points. I said, one is you've got to fight to get into mainstream and South African Broadcasting Corporation. What? You know, that was the enemy. I said, no, you've got to be part of the mainstream. Don't hand over the mainstream to people who are not telling the stories. And then I said, you've got to make good soap operas. Well, that just was the coup de grace, you know. And the reason was I'd seen Brazilian soap operas in Mozambique at a desperate time in Mozambique. Everything stopped 4 nights a week in Maputo. Rock Santeiro, Rock the Saint. A fabulous soap opera with the best directors, film directors, actors, screenwriters. A serious thing, but with bravura. It was remarkable. It was like opera was in 19th century Italy, you know. It was playing that same kind of role there. So I was trying to encourage people to do it. And we've had some purposely directed at telling a moral story, mainly about health. It could be HIV, it could be family abuse, it could be the whole range of socio-affected illnesses that people have. And there was even an African-American doctor, very smart, rather schmarmy guy, playing quite an important role with the South African woman doctor, and was she going to give up doing this fantastic work dealing with HIV in South Africa, or would she be seduced by going to the land of, glittering land of United States? Yeah, they wove in themes like that. It was a little bit maybe too didactic, but telling stories well around themes like that, well produced, well acted. There's a series called Isidingo that we all used to watch. You'd organize, you know, a soap opera's doing well when you organize your day. And when people you know that from, say, 6 to 6:30, You know, you don't set up a meeting for then because we're all going to be watching. And that dealt with tough themes. HIV, of course, being one of them. People living with HIV, homosexual relationships. And this was well before we did our court ruled that same-sex marriage was permissible. Black-white in interrelation. But it was also the mine workers, people down in the mines, the mine owners, but now some black people are mine owners. And this was, I thought, very high class. The most brilliant soap operas were produced by about high school with corrupt teachers and good teachers and kids involved with gangs and going to prison. It was fantastic. It was raw. It was very, very powerful, but it was just too much. You know, it had a series and a second series. This was world class, very creative and very, very daring and convincing and significant soap opera, but it didn't survive. And now you've got still some are imported from the United States, their local equivalents with local people, which is okay. You know, why should everything be located in Dallas when you can locate the same themes in Johannesburg? But it's not profound. It's not strong.
One more. We have time for one more question. Yes.
So you grew up in an activist household, and you had that wonderful note from your father when you were 6 years old. For somebody who isn't growing up like that, like my son who's 7, what advice could you give to try to instill in him that same type of interest and values?
My youngest son is 8, and his mother phoned him before I came here this morning. And of course it's evening there, and I did an interview for Huffington Post yesterday. It was streamed, so he saw it in Cape Town. So she was quite excited, but then he said, boring, blah, 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 you know. There daddy goes again. And I could remember that. I hated the assumption my parents had that I would follow automatically. So you'll see in the film, if you see the film, I actually took him to the site where I was blown up, and he has a beautiful little cameo part. And he came back from school one day mentioning that he told the others, that he was saying, my daddy lost his arm fighting for freedom. Now I was very thrilled to hear that. Not because he's speaking about his daddy, but fighting for freedom is a good thing. And he got that not from me, he got that from the other. So, in a sense, what I'm saying is, it's not a hell of a lot you can do. And I wouldn't say, may you grow up to be a soldier in the fight for liberation. To me, that's too heavy, although in a time of war, you know, when people are going up north and battles are being fought, it's not quite as heavy as it would be now. But I think it's how you live your life, how you deal with problems and issues, how you show courage, in ways that he can pick up on, how consistent you are in your own morality, and the things that you don't kowtow to, that other people around you maybe do, that maybe you're a bit different, I don't know. Maybe my parents went a bit too far, I don't know. I'm not going to change. I don't celebrate my birthday. That kind of birthdays for me are completely non-significant, and I find it a little bit embarrassing when people say, for he's a jolly good fellow, you know, and happy birthday to you. I don't know, there's so much in the world that's so thrilling and exciting, and it's like saying, without these formalized events, our life is empty and dull. And meanwhile, when life is full and rich and so on, you know, that's what I'm suggesting can go to your kids. And then your child, and is it he, she? He. A boy, yeah. I think the most important thing is how you live your life and the relationships that he sees around and how you take decisions and how you handle your emotions and difficulties, how you respond to problems of others, the things that are important to you. I think that's what can be best communicated.
I think that is a great note to end on. Thank you so much. We'll see you back here many times, I hope. Thank you.